Hello, everyone. So, a bit of a juicy topic this morning, and that is why does anxiety seem to suddenly disappear? Maybe it goes for weeks and all the symptoms, all the fear seems to disappear for weeks, months, years, or maybe even decades. So, how does that work or relate to everything I talk about in terms of sensitization, learning the anxiety habit, recovery? What does that mean? Why does that happen? It's a question that clients ask me often. It is a barrier to recovery because it seems so random and unexplained that people think there's something else going on. There must be something else wrong if it's coming back. I thought I dealt with it and now it's back. Why is it back? Will I ever recover? Will I be able to get over this if it keeps coming back? So it's important we demystify and understand exactly what's going on. As always, there's a completely logical reason for it, and it's totally explainable. I'm currently writing a book, and I'm covering that at the moment in the book, which will include everything I talk about in the videos as another form of help for people. But I realized I haven't done a video on it, so that's what this one is about. So again, why does anxiety suddenly seem to just disappear? In my own experience, particularly early on, it would just go. When I really didn't understand the anxiety state, at some point it would just go. And I'd be like, well, maybe it's gone, maybe it's come back. Sorry, maybe it won't come back, maybe I've dealt with it, maybe I've recovered. And I genuinely think that in some form. I also kind of knew in the back of my mind that I probably hadn't sorted it out because I didn't know why it was there in the first place. I didn't know why I had it in the first place to then understand why it's suddenly gone. And so therefore it was still mysterious to me. I was still baffled by the whole thing. And it was, as you've heard me talk about, I was doing the fingers crossed approach. So the simple explanation is that when anxiety disappears, your sensitization levels, I talk about the stress temperature model in another video that reflects your sensitization levels. When you get so sensitized, or your nervous system gets so sensitized, there's so much nervous tension that's built up over the years, you hit a threshold, which it goes over in red zone, where you're in this high alert status, and then you start to get these exaggerated anxiety, panic, anxiety, whatever physical symptoms, thoughts, fears, whatever, however it manifests for you, you hit a point where it becomes anxiety or what you know of to be anxiety. So it pops up above the threshold. So before it happened, you were coping fine, you were relatively normal. And then at some point, the pressure cooker just spills over and it becomes anxiety, and the body and mind start to react. The flight or fight response gets so overreactive to different thoughts, triggers, experiences. We can become obsessive about our thinking. We develop a fear or a phobia of certain things. Whatever we were exposed to at the time, the pressure cooker erupted, so to speak, or we went over the threshold. So again, that's why we experience anxiety. Now, early on, maybe you had a panic attack early on in life, or you had some anxiety. Maybe it was work-related, or it was related to some other aspect of you were going through some difficult relationships, some other trauma or stressful event. And that changed. The circumstances changed, and so your circumstances were more favorable. So whatever was causing you stress, it disappeared, whether you made it happen or all the circumstances in your life changed favorably, so that external stressor was gone. And so you get relief, right? It feels good. You get some hope. And then unbeknownst to you, because remember, you're not aware that you're sensitized, you just think you don't even know what this anxiety thing is. It drops back below the threshold, or maybe you do. Maybe you've been to the doctor, you've got a diagnosis, you sort of know what it is, but you don't really know what causes it. It drops back below the threshold, and it's like, oh, it's gone, and it feels so good because the comparison between how it feels below the threshold is so, the relief is so great that you genuinely feel like you've recovered or you've finally conquered it. But what's happened is you're still in red zone on the stress temperature gauge. You're still sensitized, but your emotions, thoughts, physical symptoms are not as exaggerated, and so it feels a lot more manageable. You feel like you've dropped down to green zone, but the truth is you're still in red. And then, you go through life, you push through, you get on with life, you sort of think, oh, well, it's gone now. Hopefully it won't come back. Maybe you forget about it. But all the time you're kind of still in red zone. Maybe you go a little bit lower in red zone. And this is conscious or unconscious. And at some point the stress builds back up if you've got anxiety, because that's what the anxiety state is. It's going over the threshold. At some point work gets busy again, life gets busy, memories come up, whatever it might be. And so the sensitization builds back up, hits at the threshold, and suddenly you get a panic attack out of the blue. Or you get these weird heart sensations, or the DPDR, or the head tension, or the blurred vision, or the dizziness. Something comes back up, the obsessive thinking, or you react to something difficult that's happened and you can't stop thinking about it. The obsessive thinking or the rumination happens. And all it means is that you've come back over the threshold, but because you don't know any of this, you don't have a sense that you're already in red zone. You think, well, what's going on? Why has it come back? I thought I dealt with this. I thought it had gone. But what you were doing, you were still in coping. So luckily you'd managed to, force down the lid on the pressure cooker through your coping strategies. You might have exercised obsessively. You stop working, you change work habits, all great stuff. Well, maybe not obsessively exercising, but maybe you had some good coping strategies, but they didn't really deal with the fundamental sensitization. Maybe you went to your escapes a bit more. You started madly distracting yourself just to sort of forget about it. And that built the tension up, and you kind of tried to push the anxiety aside, push any memories of it aside, thoughts about it aside, in the hope that it would never come back. But of course, if the tension's building, it's going to come out at some point if we don't have these release valves to fully desensitize. So that's why it comes back, because the sensitization was never fully dealt with. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you, you're getting worse, or that your mind's particularly in trouble or anything like that. It just means that you've tipped back over the threshold, and it sucks, it's hard, it's awful to experience, and it's a shock because, again, you weren't aware of all this. So that is all that's happening, and that's why it could be weeks, it could be months, it could be even years. We've managed to sort of teeter under the threshold for a bit, and then it's popped back up. So again, that's all that's happening. It's another baffling experience because, again, we're not privy to all this. One minute we feel normal, the next we haven't. Maybe you've done you started doing some of these recovery practices early on, and then that was enough to drop it down. Maybe you got some relief by listening to a video of mine or reading Claire Weeks, and that was enough to drop you back down, and then you sort of forgot about it, but then it comes back because the sensitization builds up again. And whilst it was great you got relief, maybe you did some practices that dropped you down a bit, but it was never fully dealt with. And so the opportunity for you now, if it is back and this is relevant for you, is to try and really deal with it properly in all the ways I talk about in all the videos. If you've got any questions, let me know, but otherwise I hope that is of use to you. Take care.